Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first micro conference. Documentation doesn't have to suck. My name is Brendan Bastine. I am the president of consulting here at Gozinta, and I will be your host for today. Today is a micro conference. What is a micro conference? A micro conference is short and sweet sessions with impactful information and actionable takeaways. Today, we will hear from Karl Palachuk on ethical leadership, Richard Tubb on networking, Eileen Wilson on a sales handoff process, and finally, last but not least, wrapping up the conference with Marnie Stockman on KPIs. Feel free to drop any of your comments down in the comments section below, and we will answer your questions after each expert has presented. So without further ado, I'd like to bring up Karl Palachuk to the stage to talk to us about the right way to treat people. How are you, Karl?
I'm excellent. Thank you. And thanks for having me here. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
All right. So I'm just going to give the shortest little introduction. I wrote a bunch of books and you should buy them all. So there you go. My favorite book is Relax, Focus, Succeed, which is about work-life balance. And for those of you who can see behind me, the surfboards here on the beach say relax, focus, and succeed. When I moved into this office, one of the first things I did is had a friend make this mural in the background. So I'm always on the beach, right? So next slide. So part of what I believe with Relax, Focus, Succeed is that everything is about work and everything is about life, and they should mesh together. And your work and your life, the more that they are consistent with each other, I believe the less stress you have in your life. If you have to take off a mask and be a different person at home or in the community or at work or in a meeting with your employees, that creates stress. And if you're the same person all the time, that reduces stress, but it means you have to make it happen because it's not going to happen by itself. All right, next slide, please. So ultimately, and you've all heard this, we do business with people we know, like, and trust. And these are people, right? Not just like, oh, there's some people on the screen and you're going to meet some fun people today and I'm going to treat them professionally because they're people that I do business with. Okay. No, I'm talking about people with families, people with problems, with personal challenges, with experiences that you don't have, with dreams that you're unaware of, with goals, and people whose lives are filled with happiness and disappointment, right? Whole human beings, that's who we do business with. And so we can't just say, well, I'm going to fit in this nice little box that says I'm professional. That is not going to get the job done. It needs to be more than that. Next slide, please. Now, I want you to prime your brain. And by that, I simply mean bring to mind the worst boss you ever had. What made them the worst boss ever? I can tell you the worst boss I ever had. Piece of cake, like no pause. I know her name. I have nightmares about her. Everyone who's ever worked for her has nightmares about her. She was a horrible human being. She was untalented. She was mean-spirited, right? People were crying at their desks. And literally, I was one of many, many people where we said, hey, you know what? It's time to go start a consulting business. And I never have to work with people like this again. So what makes your worst boss ever the worst boss, right? And part of this is, I'm not saying that your life should be completely without stress, but some stress is good for you, but low stress is better. And ultimately, bad bosses bring a great deal of stress to your life. Karl, so now you can think about what's the opposite of that, right? What's the opposite of the worst boss? Who's the best boss you ever had? Next slide, please. Now you also have to think about clients, vendors, suppliers, right? The people that you work with, who are the best and who are the worst. And, you know, a lot of us, we have this vision of the ideal client. The ideal client takes all of our advice, follows our recommendations, pays their bills in advance, never argues about anything. They don't abuse our system. They don't abuse our employees, right? All that kind of stuff. Well, excellent. We need to build that. But also, how do we deal with those difficult clients? How do we deal with difficult vendors? I think we've all had some run-in with somebody we've done business with where you want to scream at them. And in my brain, screaming is generally not the answer, right? For many of you, your worst boss was your last boss, and your worst client was the last client like that you ever had. We learn to move away from people that make our lives more difficult, and a lot of times that has to do with making our lives more stressful. And the good news is your employees know it. Today I was talking to a different group about the two biggest clients I ever fired. One of them was abusive and unmanageable. The other one was very friendly and unmanageable. And they both brought massive amounts of stress to my employees. And when I got rid of them, literally 90% of the stress in our business simply ceased to exist because I had a good mix of clients, right? Next slide, please. So, sometimes we think about, well, how do we judge other people? And we all want to be judged by our good intentions. Well, I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean to say those things. I didn't mean to come across that way, right? So that's how we want to be judged by others. But how do we judge others? Well, we judge others by their actions. Well, you may not have meant to do that. You may not have meant to say that. You may not have meant to come across that way, but you did. And that's on you, right? So when you think about that, keep that in mind, that your actions are the outward vision of a lot of your intentions. And even if it's not intended, I gotta say, you're not doing anything to stop behaving like that. So behavior absolutely matters. Next slide, please. Now, a lot of people will say, well, oh, nice. Like, nice is a bad word, especially when it comes to dating, right? Everybody says in dating, oh, God, she said I was nice. That's the worst thing you could say about me, right? But nice is not a bad word. It's okay to be nice. It's okay to focus on the things that make people happy. If you build a strong culture in your business, then you've got employees who will stay with you no matter what you do. If you build a strong culture in your business, you'll have clients who will stay with you no matter what you do. If they can rely on you, if they can depend on you, if you are consistent, then it is going to be a relationship that will last essentially forever. I literally this morning got a note from somebody who said, hey, I know that we haven't been your client in 15 years, but you still manage our email and you still manage our website and you still manage our domain names. I need to talk about a new thing that we're doing next year, right? That's a client that I literally haven't had as a managed service client in years. And yet they come to us because they know that they will get a positive experience, that they'll be treated well and they'll be treated with respect. And the note started out with, hey, I saw that you have a new granddaughter. Congratulations. I would love to see pictures, right? The human side of it lasts. And ultimately, in this business, in IT, you can make money doing basically anything you want. And if you're running a business that you hate and your employees hate and your clients hate, I got to tell you, go get a job for $80,000 and do absolutely anything else, and you will have less stress in your life, right? So if you focus on treating people well, not only will you reduce the stress in your business, but you can make this a part of your culture that will make you more successful in the long run. Next slide, please. So when you think about building this culture, I want to tie this into a bit of the documentation. Build it into your documentation. Literally, our evaluations, employee evaluations for 20 years now, have started out with the exact same requirement for every employee, no matter what their job is. The number one requirement, which doesn't change quarter to quarter to quarter. and it's true for every employee in every position. The number one requirement is to build good relationships inside our company and between us and our clients. And if people don't do that, they haven't done the number one thing at the top of their employee evaluations. And so we can build this. So I'm going to give you 3 tips to take forward with you. Next slide, please. First one is that you need to look beyond this moment. When I look at the panel here, I have known 3 of the people in this panel at different companies doing different things in different roles in their life, right? And when I think about other people in this industry, there's people that I met, 15, 20 years ago, who with a completely different company, some of them have moved from being partners to being vendors. Some have moved from being technicians to being in sales, right? People move around, and you think about your own businesses over time. You have people who just go, basically they spend their entire lives in an industry. They're going to have a lot of different relationships, but they're not going to cease to exist. So always build a relationship that can last essentially forever. Next slide, please. And then second, try the humane approach. And, my example is always like, we have a process, a procedure, a written procedure of how we fire people. Why? Because the worst way that you can fire people is the way they do it in the movies. We get together at 5 o'clock outside in the public and fire somebody in public. That is the worst thing that you can do as a human being. When we have to let somebody go, we do it 8 a.m. Monday. We give them their pay for the entire, up through the end of today. We give them time to cry, to, call their spouse, to apply for unemployment, to take care of their business, and do it in a way where the other employees know that when somebody has to leave, they do it with their head held high and they're treated with respect. Because watching the boss is the number one hobby of all employees. Next slide, please. Finally, take a breath, relax, calm down. Everybody in business should have somebody they can turn to and say, can you take a look at this? Is that the right tone? The best part about that is it means you're going to write something down before you speak the words, and you're going to have somebody else look at it, and you're going to be able to take a little bit of time and let the steam settle before you interact with other people. All right. And I think, is there another slide? It may not be. Oh, yeah. Do those 3 things. Just loop it forever. And, our first reactions tend to be very, very emotional, right? And so, if you calm down, you take a little of the emotion out of it, and then you say, okay, I'm going to look beyond this. What does the next piece look? What does this look like to other employees, other clients, other people that I do business with? And what's the human way to do this? And in business, it really doesn't hurt to be nice. It never hurts to remember the human beings. There we go.
You have absolutely hit that nail on the head. Being a leader, you're always on stage. Always.
I agree. Yeah, like I say, watching the boss is always the great hobby, the great pastime of all employees.
It is. It truly, truly is. And taking that human approach to any interaction, even going to seeking to understand and assuming positive intent in every interaction that you have, just flows right into this.
Yeah, that assuming positive intention is huge, because you can intend anything you want, but I think we have one more slide. Think about, what will this look like 10 years from now, right? Ultimately, if you assume that other people have good intentions, you're going to let a lot of the steam out before you face them with a challenge or say, hey, what are you talking about? What are you doing to me?
It's difficult. It is sometimes difficult, and needing to take a step back to understand and cool off yourself, look at it holistically, whatever situation it is, to then treat people like a human being is so critical, not only in personal life, but in business and leadership.
Right. Well, and anybody can say the words, but I got to say, give it 5 years, give it 10 years. Your employees, your clients, your vendors, everybody you deal with will know whether or not you're sincere.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Karl.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Thank you so much for coming. Up next is Richard Tubb with Business Networking for Geeks, Unlocking Success. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you, Brendan. I'm going to jump straight in and say Karl Palachuk, absolute legend in this industry. Somebody I have read all of his books, but I want to. When he said you should buy all my books, he's absolutely right. But there's one in particular, Relax, Focus, Succeed. I put in the chat, that was absolutely a life-changing book for me when I read it back in the day. So want to start out with a plug for Karl's books there. But hi, everyone. Richard Tubb here at home in the studio garage in Newcastle upon Tyne in a very cold UK today. Now, I'm a former MSP business owner turned author and speaker, and I've spent so many years now helping IT professionals like yourself, managed service providers, MSPs to grow their businesses. So today, on the subject of books, I'm excited to share some insights from my latest book, Business Networking for Geeks. Now, this book was written by me for anyone who's ever thought, business networking isn't for me. If the idea of walking into a room full of strangers makes you break out in a cold sweat, and trust me, you are not alone. I have been there too. But here's the key takeaway. Business networking isn't just about luck or charisma. It's a system that you can document, refine, and repeat for consistent success. So in the next few minutes, I'll show you just a little bit of an overview of how you can use a system around business networking to build real connections and to grow your business. So moving on, why should you care about business networking? Well, we all care about networking. I'm not talking about Ethernet cables here. I'm talking about meeting people, business networking. Well, for geeks like us, and I say for geeks like us, I'm a techie geek. I love the technology. And probably like many other people watching today, I got into the business of managed services because I love tech and I love helping people. So for geeks like us, business networking actually can feel like a bit of a distraction from our day-to-day work. But here's the hard truth. You can be the best MSP in the world, but if nobody knows about you, it really doesn't matter. Business networking isn't about selling yourself. Going back to what Karl was talking about, it's about building relationships. People do business with people they know, like, and trust. And in the tech world, relationships lead to referrals. They lead to partnerships. They lead to opportunities you would never find on your own. And so that's what my latest book is all about. It's about helping you build genuine connections that can grow your MSP business. So moving on, let's talk about why networking is so vital for geeks like us. So referrals, first of all, I mentioned referrals. Think about it. When someone's network goes down or they need cybersecurity help, they're going to ask someone they trust for a recommendation. And business networking puts you in the position to be that recommendation. In fact, I speak to hundreds, thousands of MSPs every year. And when I speak to most of the MSPs, I say, how are you growing your business? They say through word of mouth. So business networking is that system to get that word of mouth out there to build the referrals. But it's not just about referrals. Secondly, collaborations. So as an MSP, I'm a big believer in MSPs should focus on their core competencies and partner up with like-minded businesses to offer complementary services. So whether it's partnering with a voice over IP provider or a CRM provider, or working with a sales trainer to add value to your services, business networking helps you to find people who complement your expertise. And third, finally, visibility. The more people that know, like, and trust you, the more opportunities will come your way. It's as simple as that. So business networking lets you build that trust. And I'm hoping that this book and this session today helps you find out how to do that effectively. So moving on, let's give you some practical tips here. Before the event, what can you do? I'm just going to give a quick, brief overview, and then we're going to jump into the event itself. So before the event, I want you to do these things. I know networking can feel overwhelming, especially if you're an introvert. The key is preparation. So firstly, choose the right event. So use tools, and there's a couple I'm going to throw out here. Eventbrite, Meetup, Both apps, you can put them on your smartphone straight away. You'll be able to find gatherings that align with your interests. So it could be other IT businesses, other MSPs, or if you work in a niche industry or a specific vertical, sorry, for our American viewers, a niche industry or a specific vertical, you could find local interest groups for that specific niche or that specific vertical. So don't just go to any events, ask around, ask which events are working for your peers. And next, set a clear set of objectives. So are you looking to meet potential clients? Or are you looking to collaborate with other IT companies? Are you looking to find mentors or coaches? Having a goal makes it easier to focus your energy. So do your homework. And if the event publishes an attendee list, review it. Look up people on LinkedIn and make a mental note of who you'd like to meet at the event. So that preparation takes all the pressure off you when you get there, and it helps you to feel more confident. But at the event itself, making connections. So you walk into that room, and I said you come out in a cold sweat because it's like, oh, there's all these strangers here. So there's one golden rule as you figure out what it is you're actually going to have a conversation with people. Don't try and sell yourself, but just focus on having genuine conversations with people, making genuine connections. And if you're walking into that room and you think you don't know anybody there, start by looking for what they call open groups. So these are clusters of people in semicircles who seem approachable. You'll know it when you see it. There won't be two people talking face to face. There'll be a group of people and there'll be a bit of a gap there. So avoid those closed groups where everyone is locked in deep conversation and look for those open groups. And when you join in a group, ask open-ended questions like, what brings you here? Or what are you working on at the moment? So I like asking people, what's exciting? What's new for you? Most people love talking about themselves, so it's a great way to start a conversation. And here's my favorite tip. And it's going back to something Karl mentioned, a quote earlier from the great Bob Berg. Be a connector. So if you meet someone looking for a specific service and it's something that you don't offer yourself, or think about who in your network could help them. By introducing people to one another, you're actually adding value and they'll remember you for it. So don't just think, oh, I've just got to go and speak to people who are potential clients for me. Go and have conversations where you might add value. You might be able to connect them with someone else in your network. This all works. Okay, moving on. So after the event, following up. This is where most people drop the ball. Networking doesn't end when you leave the room. It's what you do afterwards that counts. So if we move on to the next slide here, first thing I want you to do is follow up within 48 hours. Send a personalized email referencing your conversation. Something like, hi, Sarah, it was great to meet you at such and such event. Always give that memory hook there. I really enjoyed our chat about cloud security. So remind them of what you talked about. And here's the article that I mentioned. You might find it helpful. So remind them of where you met, what you talked about, and then add value straight away. So you might forward them an article, follow up on the conversation. So that's a great way to get started. Secondly, I want you to use your CRM system or your PSA tool or even your phone's contact app to store details about your new connections. I want you to add notes in the note section about, again, where you met and what you talked about. Trust me when I say this, and I say this as a Brit with a memory span of a goldfish, it'll save you from loads of awkward moments later on where you're like, who was that person? Where did we meet? What did we talk about? You can actually have some fun with this. Karl earlier was saying he's got friends that he's been in the industry 15, 20 years with. I'm one of those. We were at an event not so long ago, and myself and somebody I've known for well over 15 years said, where was it we first met? And I said, hold on a minute. And I brought my smartphone up and I went, actually, we met at this event on this day and we talked about this. And they were like, whoa. But all joking aside, it's a really good way to provide memory hooks for yourself because you are going to meet a lot of people. And the final thing I'd say about effective follow-up strategies, video messaging, huge, massively overlooked. So there's tools out there. I'll just name two, but there's loads of them. Bonjoro, Vidyard. These are free tools and they make it really easy to record a quick personalized video. And trust me when I say People love these videos. Hardly anybody is doing it. And it's just so easy to be remarkable. It's simple, personal, and memorable. So moving on. What's the takeaway from the session here? Well, business networking, just like computer networking, is a skill, but it's actually one that anyone can learn. It's about building trust. It's about adding value. It's about creating opportunities, not just for yourself, but for your whole network of connections. And if you're like me, if you've ever felt really awkward or out of place at business networking events, well, that's why I wrote this book. I wrote this book for you. It's packed with practical tips, real life stories from other MSPs, and actionable advice to help you become the geek that everyone wants to know. So you can grab a copy of Business Networking for Geeks wherever you get your books. And if you'd like more resources, if you head across to my website, Tublog, the hub for MSPs at tublog.co.uk. But Brendan, I will pause there for a sip of green tea, and it is green tea. And thank you for spending time with me today. So folks, get out there, connect with people, and watch how your network grows your business. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. This is super enlightening, especially when you walk into a room of people filled with social anxiety, to have that handbook to know what to do. And when you said the semicircle, you'll know it when you see it. You'll know it when you see it for sure. It's definitely the best place to be. And once you can get uncomfortable enough to get comfortable, it'll change how you network forever.
It's this book was written because I felt this way back in the day, and some people on the call today, I've been reading my blog for a long time. I've blogged about all of the different things here, and I've pulled it all together in a single book. But I used to hate walking into a room full of strangers and going, oh, I've got to sell myself and all the rest of it. No, it doesn't have to be like that at all. Business networking is a system just like any other.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us on our micro conference.
Thank you.
And next up, we are going to be talking with Eileen Wilson on how to streamline your sales handoff process. Hi, Eileen. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Awesome. Richard, that was amazing. I will say I have anxiety. Just have to say it was a really good talk, because I have the same thing. You kind of walk in a room, right? And you're like, I get social anxiety myself. So it's, and I like, not, like you said, don't be salesy. So yeah, really good. Appreciated it. All right. So if you want to go to, I'm Eileen. Sorry, I should probably introduce myself. Eileen Wilson. I'm a founder and a partner at Pivotal Crew. If you want to go to the next slide, please. We are a ConnectWise PSA and CPQ consulting company. So we specialize in implementation, optimizations, third-party integrations, M&A, all that good stuff. Kind of fun side note, Kathy, my partner, Kathy, one of my partners and myself were the first goes into Mobius certified consultants. So
yes, you are.
Yep. I took when Heather sent me the test, I was like, took it like at 12 at night. I wanted to take it. So yeah. So I tend to kind of lean more towards finance and sales. So hence why I wanted to go over the sales approval sales handoff process, excuse me. So if you want to go to the next slide. Yeah. So a big issue I always faced working at my MSP when I started, and that I do see with a lot of clients, is a sale is closed, but nobody is notified, or the right people aren't notified, or finance isn't notified to bill, or service delivery isn't notified, right? There's no communication about what's going on. So, or there's confusion on what was sold, right? So having a defined set of offerings, not only that, but also a process that can be easily followed and hopefully automated, should help with that, ideally.
The key there is the process.
Is the process, yeah, getting and following the process. I think too, you have to keep people accountable to follow that process as well.
I find that normally once that process is written, it's easy enough to configure your systems to follow said process.
Exactly, and what I want to hear usually is if something didn't happen, it's because somebody didn't follow the process. If something fell through the cracks, right? Oh, you didn't do this part. And automating ideally is going to be it. But generally after a sale is approved by a client, I always seem to find, I don't know about you, but usually it's finance or procurement or some sort of administration generally is next, because they need to either set up the client, collect money up front. Is there, procurement needs to happen, all that. So having that automated notification, which we'll go through in a little bit, is key, I think. But the two big things, I guess, with this slide is have a defined offering and also just create and follow that process. So if we want to go to the next slide. So this is sort of a general flow. It's not going to be very specific. The next one will be. But, after sales does whatever it is that closes that sale, if they follow the process, the next department or person should be notified. So usually, like I said, I normally see finance or procurement. And then if finance and procurement, if they go through what they need to go through, and that should, again, in the end or during, notify service delivery. And then service delivery can then schedule the service, communicate with the client, communicate with procurement, or whatever is needed to get everything scheduled and delivered and keep the client informed on what's going on. And then if you can, speaking of automation, I find if you can automate things, of course, I'm coming from a ConnectWise PSA or CPQ. In CPQ, you can actually set up a convert button. So you always have to go through what's called the win process in CPQ, but you can also set up a convert button where you can convert after they go through the win process. Literally, all they have to do is hit convert and save, and it will convert to a sales order. Side note, never convert in CPQ to a ticket or project. It's a long story, but it just doesn't do it very well. I don't know if you've seen that, but
that's the truth right
it
there.
tends to ignore the departments. Yeah, so I don't know how or why it does it, but it does. So, but I find if the salesperson, because they get notified with the sale, is approved by the client, they can then go through the win process, convert it to a sales order. Then you can use sales order statuses or workflows. I usually lean towards sales order statuses to email the next department that needs to get involved, such as finance, right? And we try to practice what we preach. So, for example, at Pivotal, when a sale is closed, I get an email, because I'm more on the finance side, that there is a new sales order, and it's a ticket created on my board as well, on the accounting board.
Yeah, even Halo PSA Autotask has similar workflows that can be set up throughout the systems. From whatever you're using to sell into the PSA, and then automate the finance, the ticketing, the notifications. Everybody stays informed, and the system itself is key to setting up this workflow.
Yeah, and getting it set up, I think right to start, I think will help alleviate headaches, things like that. Yeah. So, and why is this all important to keep all this in a process and keep to the process and stick to the process? It's because you don't want to have no communication between departments. It was always very, at least, could be a little frustrating coming from the finance perspective when I didn't know about a sale. Going back to a client saying, hey, we've been supporting you for 3 months. You owe us 3 months worth of support because we weren't notified about it, right? That's never fun. So you don't want to have non-communication with clients either, right? Documentation is always really important because you don't want to be confused as to what was sold. So having that defined offerings, I think, is huge too, right? And then you don't want inaccurate billing. I think that's one thing that can very much frustrate clients is when bills are incorrect. I think that can make them get a little frustrated. And again, kind of frustrated. Oh, go ahead.
That's the second fastest way to lose a client, bill them wrong.
Yes. Yeah. And non-communication, I find. You don't want frustrated clients not knowing what's going on. I've heard clients tell me that they've had clients tell them that I feel like I just signed and was forgotten about, and you don't want that. You want to keep the clients informed through the process as well. And you can use automation and, like you said, Autotask, Halo, PSA, CPQ to keep the client informed of everything. So,
yeah, this is one of the most common things I hear I've had 2 conversations in the last week of, I won the sale, now what?
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't told finance, we haven't told projects, we need procurement. So this is, it's a common issue that, when solved for, can definitely help the communication, the missing documentation, the billing,
Right.
the invoicing. That first impression on a new client is the most critical. You don't get a second chance at a first impression.
And that's why I like sales orders. I was not, at least with that, kind of with PSA, right? At first I was like, why? You can just convert an opportunity, right? Like what's, but I was, you know what? It's actually, you can use status notifications
Yep.
on the sales orders. It's a stopgap for, whoever's next to go, okay, because every sale is, obviously you don't just offer one thing, right? This could be a project and it needs a down payment, or it's just a mouse, right? So I just need to invoice, right? Or it's a new agreement, or it's all three, right? So it's a good stopgap for, usually, like I said, it's usually finance and procurement, to stop and look and go, okay, what needs to happen with this, and then move forward appropriately.
Eileen, thank you so much for
you.
joining us today. Really solidifying that sales process and that handoff to the appropriate parties, whether it be finance, whether it be projects, whether it be all of the above, is critical, especially on a new client. I definitely appreciate your time for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Marnie Stockman. Believe it's time to crush 2025. Marnie, how are you?
I am good. How about yourself?
Doing well.
Excellent. So first, I want to say to Eileen, I ran customer success at one of the largest ed tech companies. And one of the things that frustrated me so much was when I didn't get all the information from sales on what needed to make the client successful. And so she's very much right. Having a process for that is a great way to ensure that that handoff is super smooth. And to Karl and Richard, hello, gentlemen. Has been a while since I've seen you. But they both referenced Bob Berg, who wrote The Go-Giver with John David Mann, and have made huge impact on kind of connecting the dots between what I just said around customer success and sales. Is Bob Berg's Go-Giver sort of was our philosophy along the way as we developed Lifecycle Insights. So hello to some life cyclers I see are on the call. And we grew that company without ever having a sales team because we knew if we could just make our clients successful, that we could be successful. So I appreciate all that everybody has had to say. At the beginning, you introduced me as coming to talk about KPIs, and people looking at the screen says, let's start by writing better New Year's resolutions, to which I say, marketing, folks. Like, KPIs are just not all that exciting, and New Year's resolutions is something we can all wrap our heads around, and they really done well are done the same way, and frankly they're done wrong a lot, and they're done wrong a lot for the same reasons. And lastly, you can see on the screen that I'm co-author of the book Lead It Like Lasso, which, as my cousin says, and she's on the call, is a well-packaged book of common sense. But we know that common sense ain't all that common, and a lot of people don't actually take the steps to lead their business better, lead their lives better, etc. And tying it into Ted Lasso makes it a fun, relatable way to do that. So it actually, all these things put together are going to be what move us forward in how it is time to crush 2025 with better New Year's resolutions. So in very Ted Lasso way, I must ask you a question so you can move slides. And that is, are you doing your New Year's resolutions wrong? And I hate to break it to you, but some of you are. So, news flash, you're going to find out. But the beauty of it is that if you are doing your New Year's resolutions wrong, for yourself personally or for your business, that it is January, I don't know, I think it's the 15th. It's January 15th, and that's still okay. You can still save 2025, and that's actually part of what people do wrong with New Year's resolutions. Is last Friday was officially quitting day. People normally quit their New Year's resolutions by the second Friday in New Year's. And I'm going to tell you how to rewrite them so that 2025 is not lost. 15 days in. So on the next slide, we have a quote around vision. So vision without action is merely a dream. So vision without action is just saying, whoo, I hope at the end of 2025, I'm rich and famous and fit or whatever else, right? That's just a wishing and a thinking. Action without vision just passes the time. So those of you that just are doing the next step without a vision on the end goal, you're just busy, not productive. That's a saying really don't love. And the last bit of that quote was vision without action can change the world. So getting New Year's resolutions right has action along with vision. And so it can change your world. Yes, I like the quote from Richard, vision without execution is hallucination. Even better. So let's take a look on the next slide. We have a kid's puzzle. My son loved these things. And if I asked you, where should we begin this puzzle, this maze, you would think, okay, Queen Captain Obvious, it's the start button at the top, right? We should start there. And that is why your New Year's resolutions are wrong, folks, because in fact, that is not where you should start. That is where you should finish. You should start with the end in mind, and that's how New Year's resolutions really work. So let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to show you why the start shouldn't happen from the beginning, why you shouldn't focus on the start. And if you look at the left-hand slide, that is where I started, or the left hand, that is where I started at the beginning. So I took a red pen, quickly ran into a dead end. I took the blue pen, ran into another dead end, took the yellow pen, ran into yet another. And then the green one, you can't tell, but I actually ran into 3 dead ends along the way. So by starting, I ended up with by just starting and taking a path, any path, I had no idea. It's like, if you're aiming, if you don't know where you're aiming, you could end up anywhere. That is sort of how that version of the maze went. But if you look at this one hand on the right-hand side, when I started with the end in mind, there was literally only one way to go, right? If you look carefully there, I couldn't have gone any other direction. So I knew I'm almost to the top when I have a choice. So starting with the end in mind gives you a better focus on exactly the path that you're going to need to take to be successful along the way. So, at the start, and I lived in the MSP space for 3 to 5 years while I ran Life Cycle Insights, and the start is so exciting, right? All kinds of new possibilities. Those of you that get into the bright, shiny object world recognize like, oh yeah, starting is fun. So many things to do, so many possibilities, lots of ways to go. And people are very good at the GSD, right? I can get stuff done all day, but is the right stuff. And after the start, you start to lose the determination that you had at the very beginning. And are you really going to go down all those 4 paths like I did on the left-hand side? So let's go down to the next slide. And on this side, this really is defining like how to not fall into the busy but not productive trap, right? If you start with the end in mind, you are going to avoid the dead ends. You are going to avoid the misstarts and the restarts. You also are going to avoid the failure mindset. And this is where, if you think about New Year's resolutions, the failure mindset is, why on January 10th did so many people quit going to the gym? Well, they had already missed a day. They had already had a long week and had a candy bar after work on Friday. And they thought, well, I've already ruined my chance to be in perfect shape by the end of the year. And so they've built this failure mindset around it. So if you start with the end in mind, that allows for some forgiveness along the way and being kind to yourself. And your company works the exact same way. Starting with the end in mind also prunes dead branches you didn't even know were happening. If you notice, going backwards, I could not have gone wrong as many ways as I did when starting forward. So I think that's really important to keep in mind as you're looking at those dead ends. a quick story here. So it's not a New Year's resolution. It was a Lenten resolution, but it's the same idea. So 40 days, I'm going to give something up. I was 22 and I decided I was going to give up all junk for Lent. I totally can do that for 40 days. Not a problem. I am one of those disciplined kind of folks. So I gave up all junk for 40 days. And then my cousin knows, stinking sister has her birthday during Lent. And my mother says, oh, you are going to eat her birthday cake. So then I blew it, right? Like it's already ruined at that point, and I didn't have a choice. Like you wouldn't argue with my mother either. Trust me, you're going to have the cake. So I wasn't able to fulfill the New Year's resolution. I totally would have skipped that cake. It wasn't the temptation of the cake. It was just the family rule that like you were going to participate in the birthday. And so from that moment on, I was 22, I'm 54 now. So this is a lot of Lenten, New Year's, and other resolutions that I've managed to stick to because I started looking at it as by the end of this time period. So by the end of 2025, I'm going to be better at X, Y, or Z. I'm going to eat fewer pieces of cake. Richard said he'll take the cake next time. I appreciate that. It's at the end of next month, so get a flight, Richard. So it's, if you start with the end in mind and that you're going to be better at doing something consistently, you are again more likely to forgive yourself along the way. Now, so this was personal New Year's resolutions, but business ones work the exact same way. So on the next slide, we'll take a look at, so I have 3 documents for our documentation webinar for you to use for your business. This is not rocket science. As my cousin said with the book, right? It's well-packaged common sense, but people do not follow through. And if you don't write these things down, you're not writing them down because you're letting yourself off the hook already, right? It's much more of a commitment to write the goals down. So you should have one big vision for your company, your body, your health, your family for the year, right? And so you write that down at the top, and then you pick 3 goals that would make that effective. So by doing this, by starting with what are 3 big things that would show that to be true, you're starting with that end in mind. So instead of saying, for my business to triple what we did last year, what you shouldn't do is say, I'm going to do 3 times as many sales calls. I'm going to send 3 times as many emails. I'm going to do 3 times as many X, Y, or Z, right? You don't know which of those paths are most effective. But when you start thinking about what is evidence that I've met my goal, if I do these 3 things, I will be effective, you're now pruning a lot of things that weren't going to help along the way. So from there, you set the targets based on that. And again, we're working backwards. Where will you be at the end of Q3 in order to hit that Q4 target? Where will you hit at Q2? Now, I'm a math person and I could geek out on this, but I won't because I don't want to make people nervous. But if you just say, okay, I want to make 100 sales by the end of the year. If you already have Eileen's process in place, right, then you could say, it's going to be 25 each quarter. But if you are starting with ground zero, you are not going to make 25 this quarter. So you need to think about how that's going to ramp up. So you could say, I'm going to have 10 by the end of this quarter and 35 by the end of Q2. And then I'll have 60 by the end of, or 65 by the end of Q3. And then I can hit 100 by the end of the year. So you have to be smart about it, because if you just take 100 and divide by 4 because it comes out with, a number divisible by 5, that's not actually realistic, right? You have to actually think of it backwards. I have to agree with Brian Johnson's comment that if you really want success, go for big, hairy, audacious goals. The BHAG of Jim Collins. I'm a super fan of that. But maybe my favorite step on this template is the last one there, which is the potential obstacles. Because if you think about what's starting, in that kid's maze, starting at the beginning, you ran into a lot of paths that weren't going to get you anywhere. And if you could have said from the beginning, that's going to be a problem and I'm going to block it off, starting from the beginning would have been fine, right? Starting from the end, it cleared those paths. So if you think about what are potential obstacles, well, if it's a sales type of thing, I want to make 300 calls, but I actually don't have anybody trained in that. Well, then maybe you need to document how to do a sales call, right? You need to hire somebody. You need to train someone. Maybe you need resources. Maybe there's a competitor. If you don't think about those things, you're not going to be successful. Believe me, the year after my mom told me about the cake thing, I made my first New Year's, or my first Lenten resolution would be like, I won't have any junk during Lent except for Karen's birthday. And yes, my sister's name is Karen, which just adds to the flavor of fun for the stress, right? So if you see the potential obstacles coming, you can avoid it. I avoided it. I put a loophole right in my own resolution. I was good to go. So once you filled this out, then the next step is to really reflect. Nick and I, with the Lead It Like Lasso, do a lot of talking with folks and groups of people around personal leadership and what makes a difference in success. And a lot of it, so the number one thing for a leader is self-awareness, which I think is interesting. So, do you know if you're doing your New Year's resolution or KPIs wrong? But the second piece is about reflection. If you're not taking time to look back at your goals and be Oklahoma honest with yourself, then you're never going to get better. So the beauty of putting it all in one sheet is it holds you accountable. And there's nothing like an accountability buddy to really make sure that you're aiming and going to hit the target that you're aiming for. The next slide has a book, aside from Bob Berg and John David Mann's Go Giver. This book has made a big impact in my life. So the next slide has on it 10x is easier than 2x. So it was interesting after we sold Lifecycle Insights. I'm no Karl Palachuk, believe me. I've written 3 books for the MSP space, very specific and focused around customer success, quarterly business reviews. And in doing that, Nick and I were talking about, well, after we sold Lifecycle Insights, how would we 10x success if we decided to write a book? And so this book is actually what made us write the book about Ted Lasso, because we thought, well, there are 20 million people on Apple TV that have watched Ted Lasso. If we can connect some leadership ideas to that, that should 10x our strategy. What I couldn't do is write twice as many books as I had done to try to get twice as much business. Thanks. Karl tells me I still have time to write 20 more books. So it's interesting when you think about how to 10x something. So we were in startup mode for the 3 years before we sold Lifecycle Insights. And if somebody said I needed to do twice as much business to get sold, I don't know how that would have happened, because I was already working 70 to 85 hours a week. If you double that, you run out of hours in weeks, right, where you could actually get something done. So this book talks about, well, then don't think about doubling it, because if you just try to double your output, you're just going to literally double up on everybody's work. And that's extremely stressful. What happens if you think, I want to 10x my goal? So if you say, what am I going to 10x? You have to do some things differently. And those big rocks that you set along the way are going to be different. But the most important part of this is the last slide. I think it's the last slide. And that is to think about what you're going to stop doing for the year. Because that is the one, if you think about that start slide that has you running down all the wrong paths, some of the things you're doing now are only going to be incrementally more helpful, and you're not trying to be incrementally more helpful. You're trying to be demonstrably more productive. So what can you stop doing that's getting in the way of major progress and major milestones? So many folks add something new to their KPIs, their New Year's resolutions, etc. And it's not what you're going to add, but what you're going to take away that really makes a huge difference. So I can see on the right-hand side is in like a lot of text has gone through. So I'm going to read through and see if there's anything I need to tend to in the questions before I sign off. And happy to hear, Brendan, what you have to say.
This is fantastic. Everything is fantastic. The stop list is critical. In my in my I gotta say the last 30 days, I've realized that I have to create a stop list, because if I'm going to be productive, I need to know what I need to stop. And I've had a team behind me to help me with that. But that was completely like eye-opening and effective to getting more done.
Yeah.
Setting that goal and then milestones and working backwards. I've never seen it put in puzzle before, and it was the perfect analogy of how to get where you want to go with the least resistance.
I don't know when I ran into the puzzle like hack, but my son loved those puzzles when he was little, and he was like, am I going the right way? Right? He would always ask who's going the right way. So at some point I realized like, okay, I can check it backwards and I'll be able to tell if he's going, because otherwise, like, it's the same game for everybody. Let's start at the beginning. So that was a good hack that I think works for more than just children's games. But if you really do focus on that end goal and take away the stuff that's not needed, you're really streamlining.
Absolutely. Marnie, I very much appreciate your time and coming out to us today and spending time with us.
Thanks for having me.